3 Philadelphia Eagles players are going to walk into the Jefferson Health Training Complex over the next few weeks carrying a weight that the rest of the roster simply does not carry, my friend. While somewhere between 45 and 50 players can already consider their spots essentially locked in for Week 1 of the 2026 season, there is a much smaller group living a completely different reality. These are players with no long-term security at all, men who suddenly find themselves fighting for space behind established starters and behind rookies selected high in the draft. And when Howie Roseman makes that final trim down to 53 names, at least 3 of them could simply vanish from the list. One is a former 4th-round pick who never earned the trust of Vic Fangio. Another just watched the franchise spend a 2nd-round pick on his exact position. And the third signed back in March, imagining he would be a meaningful piece of the offense. In this video, I am going to break down the 3 names walking into this training camp on a tightrope, the reason each one is in that situation, and what the numbers really say about their odds of surviving until September. If you are a die-hard Eagles fan, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because the next few weeks are going to define the roster that fights for a title, and these decisions happen far too fast for anyone who blinks. Here is the deal. The Eagles roster in 2026 does not have many truly contested battles. There is the question of the third safety, the one who comes in when Vic Fangio goes to his defensive sub-packages and kicks Cooper DeJean into the slot. There is a real logjam on the offensive line that has to be resolved. And there is one more quarterback than there are roster spots. Beyond that, roughly 40 players can comfortably sign another year lease on the homes they live in today. But what about the ones who do not have that comfort? What about the ones who arrive in July knowing that every single practice is worth a paycheck? The list published by Clutch Points points to 3 names: cornerback Kelee Ringo, tight end Grant Calcaterra, and wide receiver Marquise Brown. Let us start with the most obvious case of them all. Kelee Ringo was a 4th-round pick out of Georgia, and plenty of people imagined he would become a defensive starter alongside other former Bulldogs who also landed in Philadelphia, guys like Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, and Nolan Smith. That is not what happened. Ringo never fell into the good graces of Vic Fangio because of technical issues at the cornerback position, and the result was a career built essentially on special teams. In 2025, he played 311 defensive snaps against 312 on special teams. Notice the detail there. Those 311 defensive snaps were a career high for him. A career high, my friend, and still matched by his special teams workload. But now the equation has gotten drastically worse. After the Eagles added Rick Woolen and Jonathan Jones in free agency, the chance of Ringo getting any meaningful defensive playing time became something close to improbable. Woolen arrived on a 1-year contract that can reach $15 million, and he immediately became the favorite to start on the outside alongside Quinyon Mitchell. Ringo, suddenly, is battling names like Jacorian Bennett, Mac McWilliams, and Ambry Thomas for, at absolute best, the 5th cornerback spot on the roster, barring injuries. And then comes the factor that might be the most decisive of all. If he finally figures it out, he would require a new contract to stick around in Philadelphia going forward. Does it make sense for Roseman to hold on to a 4th-year player in that situation instead of betting on someone younger, cheaper, on a longer deal, or even an undrafted free agent who shines in training camp? Could Ringo become the player the fan base always envisioned? Right here in his 4th training camp in Philadelphia? He could. But if his play stays at the same level as 2025, his best outcome might not even be staying. It might be getting traded for a conditional pick or another marginal player, finally chasing a permanent home in the National Football League somewhere else. It is harsh to say that about a player who is still young, but the National Football League market does not wait for anybody. The second name is a case of pure calendar bad luck. Grant Calcaterra was also a day 3 draft pick by the Eagles. He also looked like he had a long-term role locked up at one point, and he watched the 2026 offseason unfold in the worst possible way for him. Calcaterra re-signed with the team at exactly the moment when Dallas Goedert's future looked murky at best. In that instant, there was a very real possibility that he would lead a tight end room that also featured Johnny Munt, a new addition, and returning undrafted free agent E.J. Jenkins. It was the chance of a lifetime for him. And then it all collapsed. Goedert ended up re-signing on a 1-year deal, and Roseman went further and made waves in the 2026 draft by selecting Eli Stowers with the 54th overall pick. Stowers is not just some project. He won the Mackey Award as the best tight end in college football. He was a first-team All-American. He led every tight end in the country in receiving yards last season, and he set positional marks at the combine in the vertical jump and the broad jump. In other words, the Eagles did not spend a second-round pick to get a backup. They spent it to get Goedert's long-term replacement. The result? Calcaterra is now competing for the third tight end spot against a blocking specialist in Munt and against a few camp bodies. And there is an extra layer of risk here. If Roseman decides to keep only 3 tight ends, or if offensive coordinator Sean Mannion opts to preserve a roster spot for a player capable of moonlighting at fullback, someone like Cameron Latou, Carson Steele, or Willie Lampkin, Calcaterra becomes exactly the odd man out. And after apparently not drawing much attention in free agency, the most likely scenario might be the practice squad, ready to be activated if somebody gets hurt. But it is also possible his run in Philadelphia simply comes to an end, with his agent looking for opportunities elsewhere. The third name is the most surprising on the list, and maybe the most debated. Marquise Brown signed with the Eagles in March on a 1-year contract valued at roughly $5 million according to Spotrac, with a reported maximum value of $6.5 million. And even so, there is a real chance he does not finish training camp on the roster. Brown is another Oklahoma product, just like Jalen Hurts and Calcaterra himself. He was a first-round pick by the Baltimore Ravens in the 2019 draft, and his speed quickly turned him into one of Lamar Jackson's favorite targets. Now let us get to the numbers, because they tell the complete story. Across 7 seasons in the league, Brown has maintained a double-digit average in yards per reception at absolutely every stop of his career. That is real consistency as a vertical threat. The problem is the raw production. In 2021, his final season in Baltimore, it was 91 receptions for 1,008 yards. In 2025, it was 49 receptions for 587 yards. The drop is brutal, my friend. We are talking about less than half the production volume in 4 years. And now he enters year 8 of his career, at 29 years old. The question the entire organization is going to answer in training camp is simple and cruel at the same time. What if he has lost a step? Brown could finally be that deep speed threat the Eagles have been chasing for years, giving Jalen Hurts a weapon down the field that he has not had since the best days of Quez Watkins. But what if he can no longer breeze past opposing cornerbacks? What if he has to learn to win in other ways, becoming a slot player or even a gadget piece, despite having a frame that is far from prototypical for those roles? The point is direct. If Brown cannot go fast anymore, the Eagles are going to have to look for speed somewhere else, whether from one of the in-house options already on the roster, or through a trade before Week 1. And it is worth remembering the context of the receiver room this offseason. With A.J. Brown traded to the New England Patriots, Philadelphia rebuilt the position around Devonta Smith, first-round rookie Mekhi Lemon, and Dontavion Wicks. That pushes Hollywood Brown into the fight for the 4th receiver spot, and the 4th receiver spot is cut territory on virtually every roster in the National Football League. Now, to be fair and transparent, it is essential to make a few things very clear. First, none of this is cut news. No reporter has reported that any of these 3 players is being released. We are talking about an editorial projection based on roster composition, and a projection is not a decision. Second, Kelee Ringo has concrete value on special teams, and special teams decide roster spots every single year in the National Football League. Those 312 snaps are not a detail, they are a resume. Third, Hollywood Brown was coming off a 2024 season essentially wiped out by a shoulder injury, and he still came back in 2025 to play 16 games and score 5 touchdowns in a shorthanded offense. A full summer of work could completely change the read on him. And fourth, Grant Calcaterra knows the system, and system knowledge is worth a lot when a team needs a ready body in the middle of the season. It is also worth remembering Howie Roseman's track record. The man rarely makes the obvious cut by the obvious route. He trades, he negotiates, he turns an expendable player into a conditional draft pick. So maybe the outcome here is not a cut at all, but 3 transactions nobody sees coming in the last week of August. With 3 veterans on a tightrope, a roster with real depth, and a Howie Roseman who loves to surprise everyone at final cut time. Which of these 3 do you believe survives until Week 1? And which one do you think already has 1 foot out of Philadelphia? Leave your opinion in the comments. Do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I will be back later to update you with the latest Eagles news.